You know, I've been disabled my whole life, and I didn't even find out until I was almost 47 years old. So, let me tell you a little bit about that while I clean up my kitchen. So, as far back as I can remember, I've always had issues with falling down, with muscle weakness, especially in my legs, somewhat in my arms, but really a lot in my legs. I could never jump. I could never run. Never run. Not even sprint. Like the minute I try to take off running, my legs will cramp up like tight and I feel exhausted immediately. So, never been able to do that. Never. Red Rover. No, nobody wanted me on their team because I could never run fast enough to break the line. I never won Duck, Duck, Goose, ever. It's sad, but it's true. I walked funny. Walking upstairs was difficult always, especially now, but it was difficult when I was a child. So I always dealt with these things, and I never really knew that there was a problem. My parents, I remember taking me a couple times to the doctor to see why I'm having these issues with falling down. Well, the doctors would examine me. It was probably maybe 2 times. They would look at me and they told my parents, you know, there's nothing wrong with her. She's just going to grow out of it. She's just clumsy. So I grew up thinking I was clumsy and I'm unathletic. So here I am thinking I'm just clumsy and unathletic. I had no idea. I remember kids would make fun of me for walking funny. I earned the nickname Rubber Band Legs. So it's kind of funny now, and even back then when the kids would make fun of me, I didn't feel like I was being bullied or, I didn't go home crying. I always just dealt with it with my sense of humor. I always had friends, even the kids that would make fun of me, I'd make fun of myself and I would just crack jokes and do things to make people laugh because it was embarrassing to me and I didn't know how to deal with it, but that's what I did. I used my sense of humor and it worked perfect. I didn't grow up feeling like I was bullied and abused or anything. So when I went to 7th grade, there was this one time that I remember we were running laps in gym class and there were a couple PE teachers at this school that I had went to, and they called me over from running laps and they had me sit down on the bleachers with them and they asked me, Kandi, why aren't you running? Why can't you run? And I didn't know what to tell them. I just told them I don't know, but I was very sensitive, and still to this day things will make me tear up, if I'm thinking about them. But back then especially, I was a really sensitive kid, and I just remember feeling so ashamed that I couldn't run and I didn't know why. So by this time, my parents had stopped taking me to the doctor. I never remember having any conversations with my parents about it. I never complained to them or to any PE teacher or to any doctor to let them know, hey, I'm having these kind of struggles. So I kind of just thought, I'm unathletic and this just must be what it means to be unathletic. I don't know. So I basically gave up even trying. And, to me, it was just too hard to try to do these exercises that the other people were doing, especially as I got older to help lose weight. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was all about exercise and low fat. So I would try, and I thought, well, maybe I'm just so far out of shape, I need to start at the very beginning. So I remember doing Richard Simmons, Sweating to the Oldies, and even that would it's horrible, but even that would get me exhausted and tired. So I basically just gave up. I gave up because I didn't know what it was and I felt like I was never going to get anywhere. So I just wasn't even going to try. I kind of started separating myself from any kind of activity that involved physical fitness or exercise or any kind of walking. Basically anything that I would have to exert myself if I was walking a lot or running or going upstairs or having to use my muscles to do anything like skiing or anything like that, because I couldn't do it and I didn't know how to explain that I couldn't do it, and I didn't want anybody that I was with to feel like they were being held back. If we're going on a hike and I get tired the first 500 feet, what's that going to do for the rest of the party? They're not going to understand. They're just going to think I'm being lazy. So I didn't want to be viewed as being lazy. So I did start making up excuses as to why I couldn't go. Either my knee hurt, or I twisted my ankle, or I just didn't like doing that. No, hiking's not for me. When in reality, I would have loved to do these kind of things, but I just did not have the ability to do them. So I just stopped. I just separated myself from any kind of activity that involved that. And I became really good at hiding the fact that I was having these problems, considering I was almost 47 before, anybody ever knew, including me. Not only did I exclude myself from activities because I didn't want to hold anybody back, I also grew up feeling like I was not good enough. I always had this secret that I had to keep, that I couldn't do these certain things. And especially in my relationships with men, I would push them away a lot, because I always felt like I wasn't good enough. I didn't have much to offer. I can't even go on a hike with you. Things like that. It really bothered me. So for a long time, I ended up pushing people away. It was just easier to keep to myself than to build these relationships with people that I would end up letting them down at some point. There was one job where I had to get a physical, so I went to the doctor and he was testing my reflexes, and I had no reflexes. And I remember him being kind of accusatory, like asking me, why don't you have reflexes? I don't know. You're the doctor. Why don't you tell me? I just felt like throughout my life, anytime anybody has ever approached the subject of my being weak or my not being able to do certain things, it's been kind of like accusatory. I felt like I was being accused of not doing it right. So I'm telling you, I became really good at hiding stuff. I lived in a 2-story house for most of my life with my parents, and they never knew I struggled to go upstairs. I remember having to carry laundry up, and I'd have to put the basket 2 steps up, climb up 2 steps. I couldn't just take that basket and walk upstairs without holding on to a banister. It was just impossible for me, and I didn't know why. So fast forward to when I got the testing. In the beginning of 2019, I had gotten a head injury, so I started to have migraines, so I decided to see a neurologist. And then I started thinking, that I should ask this neurologist about the issues with my legs, because since Google had become a thing, I Googled every symptom I ever had, and I self-diagnosed myself with having muscular dystrophy. I was convinced that that's what it was, but I never shared those suspicions with anybody. I never told anybody, not my husband, not my kids, not my parents, not my doctor, nobody. So finally, I was already going to see this neurologist, so I decided, let me approach the subject. Let me just tell them about the issues I'm having with my legs. So I almost backed out. Like, I don't know why it took so much courage to even get the words out of my mouth, but I really had to muster up the courage. And I told the doctor, after he's, seen me for my migraine, we're getting ready to leave, and I said, you know what, I want to ask you something else. And I explained to him the weakness that I was experiencing. I mustered up the courage to ask the doctor about this weakness that I was having in my legs. And he basically had me stand up, see if I could lift my leg up, things like that. And he brushed me off, basically. He told me, it's just myopathy, and you'll probably never know what it is. You'll never be diagnosed. And I just thought, well, why? Isn't there testing that I can do to see exactly what it is? And he said, why? Why would you want testing? The only reason why it would matter is if you are going to have children and are afraid to pass it on to your kids, and you've already had all the children you're going to have, so why does it even matter to do testing? So I left there, and trust me, I was crying because it took so much courage, and he just made me feel like crap. So I left there. I couldn't talk about it anymore because he really upset me. And then when I got home, I was thinking about it, and I thought, well, let me email him and just see if maybe he could send me for a biopsy. I don't know how the procedures work or, what kind of steps you have to take, but I just basically emailed him and said, hey, can I get a biopsy? Because maybe that would help diagnose what it is. And he told me, nope, he doesn't do biopsies. And so I asked him, could you recommend somebody like a company or another doctor that I could go see for this that would help me and maybe do a biopsy? And he told me no. So I, again, felt like crap, and I just decided, forget it. But I kept Googling, kept looking throughout the year, and at the end of the year, I thought, this is something. I know it's not just me, it's not in my head. So at the end of 2019, I ended up changing insurance companies because I figured maybe it would benefit me. Maybe the new insurance company would have better doctors that would do something for me. So I changed insurance companies, and in the beginning of 2020, I made an appointment with the neurologist, had everything set up, and that is when the world shut down and COVID hit. So COVID hit, and I could not go to the doctor to get any kind of help. So all my appointments were canceled. A year goes by, and it's 2021 now. And I decide to call up Kaiser and see, hey, can I reschedule my appointment? So at that time, they had started doing phone appointments or video appointments. So I did talk to the doctor, the neurologist, and told him the issues I was having. And he actually said, let me send you for an EMG. So I didn't know what that was, but it's a test where they put all these electrode needles into your muscles and have you do different things. So he sent me for that, and it seemed like it took forever for the results to come in. But when they came in, he told me that it was negative for muscular dystrophy. I did not have that, but it did show a lower motor neuron disease. And he didn't know exactly what it was, but he asked me, he did explain that there's so many variables in these diseases that we may never pinpoint exactly what it is, but would you like to go further and have genetic testing? And I almost said no, because at this point it seemed like every time I tried, I just got shot down. But I said, yeah, what is the genetic testing? What do you do? And he said, well, you just do a blood test. So, okay, let me do a blood test. So I got the blood test, and months went by, and I hadn't heard anything. And he did tell me they were sending the blood to the Mayo Clinic to get it, the blood read. And when I finally decided to call him, he looked and he said, okay, the results are in. We tested for 3 different things, and one of them came back positive, and it is positive for spinal muscular atrophy. So that is the first time I ever heard of spinal muscular atrophy. It was about 1.5 months prior to my 47th birthday. So I finally had a diagnosis, and he explained briefly what it was, that it's a genetic disease, and that there is no cure, that there are treatments available that they would have to see if I qualified to have the treatment. But the treatment doesn't make it go away. It only is supposed to stop the progression. The doctor was actually really flabbergasted and asked me, how did you not know that you had this your entire life? And I just told him, in the beginning, the doctors just brushed it off, and I never knew what it was, so I just became really good at hiding it. So to me, it was a blessing and a curse all at once, and more of a blessing. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but the curse is I found out I had this disease, and it's not going to go away. Well, I dealt with that my entire life, so nothing changed in my eyes. Nothing changed. So the blessing is I finally found out what it was, and now could start dealing with it and facing it. Because, when you're fighting an enemy and you don't know what it is, it's hard to fight. There's nothing that you can do because you don't know what avenue to take, because you don't know what you're dealing with. So, I don't hold any grudges against the kids that used to make fun of me, or the doctors that just brushed me off or made me feel less than. I always tell my husband, life's too short to hold on to grudges. If you're holding on to those grudges, you're never going to catch any of life's blessings. So don't hold hate in your heart, life's too short. So do not hold on to grudges. It's just too much negative energy, and nothing beneficial is going to happen from that. So that's my story in a nutshell about how I found out that I had spinal muscular atrophy. If anybody would like to follow my journey, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you'd be notified when I upload videos. And until next time, stop eating processed foods.